Paris. City of love, romance and dreams. So they say. I used to say it too. But ever since that day, the day of the murder, I've always associated my beloved Paris with death. I was at home having a bath when my editor called.
Collard, get your ass over to the Palais Royal now. You got an interview. With Pierre Carchon. Yes, the Pierre Carchon. No photos, so leave your gear at home. He asked for you personally. Don't ask me why. Anyhow, this could be big, so if he makes a pass, don't forget. Just smile, say yes, and keep taking notes.
So charming and so very apt. Pierre Carchon was a media king, a national hero, and one of the most infamous adulterers in Europe. He and his wife Imelda were just one step down from royalty. Whoa, I hate mimes, but unless you humor them, they don't go away. Here I was, the palace of the Media King and the Ice Queen. I pressed the doorbell and set in motion a chain of events which would change my life forever.
Yes? What is it?
Madame, my name is Nico Collard. I'm here to see Monsieur Carchon.
Come up, we're on the first floor.
Madame Carchon, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Yes, I'm sure.
The Ice Queen was certainly living up to her reputation. Will you be staying for the interview?
Mademoiselle, I know little of my husband's business affairs, and I care even less. I certainly have no intention of watching him pore over yet another pretty little journalist.
Pretty? You're too kind, madame.
Ah, the talented and very beautiful Mademoiselle Collard. Such a pleasure to meet you at last.
Monsieur Carchon, I am honored.
Oh, I'm sure you are.
Call me Pierre, please. But I do not flatter you idly. I was a friend of your father. He was a great man.
My father? He never mentioned.
He and I were very close. And then his death. So tragic. I must... Imelda, your damned cat's in my study again. Another Ming vase, I suppose. Excuse me for one moment, my dear girl.
You journalists are getting younger each year.
Perhaps it's the rest of the world getting older, madame. That was no cat.
My God, what? Monsieur Carchon!
He's dead. I must call the police. You'd better stay here.
There was a man. It was the mime. Do you think he...
Well, I believe we can rule out suicide, don't you?
No wonder they called her the Ice Queen. She would have been top of my list of suspects if I hadn't seen the attacker myself. And if I hadn't come across a couple of murders just like this already. One of the most important men in Europe murdered And here was I, Nico Coulard, alone at the scene of the crime. Should I wait for the cops? Or start my own investigation? It was a no-brainer. Mimes and guns don't usually go together, but I had an idea that this was no ordinary mime. I'd come across this murderer before, and written about him. The costume killer, at least that's what I'd called him. It was one of my hair clips. My favorite, in fact. It must have fallen when I was knocked down. I closed his eyes. It was the least I could do for the poor fellow. I opened his eyes. Best to leave the crime scene as I found it. Some people hate searching corpses for clues. Me, I'm okay with it. Reminds me of an old boyfriend. In his pocket, I found a ticket stamped Bateau de la Conciergerie. Taking the ticket meant I tampered with the evidence. There was no going back now. Carchon had been shot. A bust of Pierre Carchon, humble servant of La France. A small round piece of glass had been cut out of the pane. This was a professional job. I didn't want to cut myself and leave blood on the glass. Call me old-fashioned, but I like to keep my DNA to myself. It was a boat ticket stamped back. When I was a little girl, Papa used to... The bookcase was filled with obscure first editions. The killer must have used a ladder to reach the window. He was long gone. Guess he folded that ladder up, popped it in his pocket and took it with him. Pierre Carchon again. His eyes seemed to follow me around the room. The police could turn up at any minute. Somewhere there were clues to the murder, and I needed to find them. I reckoned that cloth might just turn out to be useful. Even my fingernail wouldn't fit into such a small hole. Aha! Nico, you are just so damn good at this stuff. Instead of comforting Imelda, I was ransacking her flat. Why? Because there was something going on here, and I had to get answers before the cops arrived. And hey, she'd been rude to me, so she had it coming. Imelda had talent, but I certainly wasn't going to tell her that. It was a tube of acrylic paint, French ultramarine. Just the color I was after for my bathroom. Young lady, what are you doing? Oh, this paint. It's my favorite color.
For God's sake, keep the damn stuff.
Excuse me, madame.
Yes?
Why would a mime want to kill your husband?
Pierre had plenty of enemies. Half the husbands in Paris for a start.
How did your husband know my father?
I have no idea.
You didn't know him? Thierry Collard?
Pierre knew a lot of people I didn't know, most of them women.
I am so sorry for your loss, madame.
No, you're not. You're a journalist. Journalists don't feel sorry.
Not true.
We shall see. The last thing she needed to talk about was paint. Imelda might not have been so cool with me poking around if I'd shown her the key I'd found. So, her husband took secret boat trips. Did she really need to see the ticket?
You're upset, madame. Please take this.
That is the lace cloth from the table. What can you be thinking?
Would you like to see my favorite hair clip?
What a ridiculous question. Of course not.
Huh. Another time, I guess.
Why did your husband send for me? What did he want to discuss?
I have no idea. His business was his business.
He never told you anything?
No, and frankly I preferred it that way. This is quite a scoop for you. I suppose you're already inventing the headlines.
Just because I am a journalist.
Don't patronise me. You're all cut from the same cloth. Do you have any moral sense at all?
Yes, that's why I do this job.
You do it to see your name in print.
As if. My editor gets the byline, I just do the work.
Well, don't expect my sympathy.
The police will be here soon, madame. Is there anybody you would like me to contact? Family, friends?
No, I have no family. Pierre and I were... He was all I had, really. Not much, was it? The dutiful wife. That was my role. He never talked, never let me in.
I know one thing, madame.
What?
If you want to find out who killed your husband, then you let me do the job, not the police.
Why? How do I know I can trust you?
Your husband invited me here today because he needed me. I think he knew somebody wanted to kill him, and he knew I could help.
I doubt it was your database he was after.
You're wrong. I was onto his killers already, I am sure of it. Please, you owe it to him.
I don't know.
All I need is a few more minutes to look around before the police come.
You really do have a moral sense, don't you? I trust so few people. And perhaps Pierre really did think that you could help. Of course it wouldn't have stopped him seducing you too. Here, take this. It's the key to the drawing room next to the library at the end of the hall. It was Pierre's room. I rarely went in there. I couldn't. I was too scared of what I might find.
Thank you. I promise you won't regret this. There was no one I needed to phone. Not until I had solved this case. The door was locked. Now we were getting somewhere. I didn't need the lights on. It was light enough already. The painting showed the Cachons together, in love. As the poet said, the past is a different country. Or did I read that in a fortune cookie? There was the very faintest of clicks. Behind the picture was a safe. In the safe was some kind of artifact. There were strange symbols on its surface. It looked like the printer's blocks I'd made at art school. If there was one thing I'd learned about symbols, they are always important. But these symbols scratched into stone were impossible to read. I needed to find a way of printing them. At least the stone was round. But what could I use for ink? And what could I print on? Sure, I was stealing, but I knew Imelda didn't know about the artifact, and Cachon was past caring.
No. Putting the paint straight on the cylinder. I smeared the paint all over the cloth. When I do messy, I really like to put my heart into it. I hoped this was going to help. They don't make lace like that anymore. I wiped the paint-covered cloth over the surface of the stone cylinder. It took me right back to art class at school. And Maurice, my gorgeous art teacher. This wasn't the time for me to lie on the sofa doing my Marie Antoinette impression. Though it is very popular at parties, especially with gay guys. Don't ask me why. As expected, the desk was yet another priceless antique. Yawn. The blotter and in tray had clearly been placed with mathematical precision. Genius! The roller and the paint worked just as I planned, but what did it say? It was some kind of coded message. It read, "Sub judice." I may not have learned a lot as a journalist, but that was a term I knew well. It means a legal case that is before the courts. Below it was a sequence of letters that made no sense. I suddenly realized there was a connection between the boat ticket and the coded message. The boat ticket was stamped Bateau de la Conciergerie. The conciergerie on the Ile de la Cité, by the river, housed the ancient law courts. So, sub judice could in this case mean literally under the law courts, below the conciergerie. Locked, not surprising really. It didn't work, but I guess it would have been surprising if it had. I didn't need to take the leather holder with me. I didn't want to take the tray, but I knew that I could use it. No. The cloth would get paint on the tray, but not enough for what I needed. I'd spread blue paint over the bottom of the tray. It was ruined. I was a very bad girl, but also quite a clever one. I rolled the artifact in the paint until it was completely coated. An antique tray with paint spread all over it. Not a lot I could do with that. No. The tray was already ruined. No. 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 A medieval pageant. Original, no doubt. The tapestry must have cost a fortune. Madame Cachon,
Please call me Imelda. We hardly need the formalities now, do we?
Did Monsieur Cachon say nothing to you about my father?
No. I'm sorry, he never mentioned him.
I was confident that Imelda wouldn't recognize the patterns. She'd know I'd broken into her husband's safe if I showed her the artifact. That would have been insane.
Thank you. Let me give you the key back. I didn't need it anymore.
Not a good idea. She was already upset and I knew she loved her fabrics. The last thing she needed to talk about was paint. I was sure that there was more to find. I just had to keep looking. There was no one I needed. I thought of leaving, but was sure there was more to find. No. No. The ticket could be a clue, so best not to trash it. It was a boat ticket. It contained rows of titles I didn't recognize. The killer must have used a ladder to reach the window. A bust of Pierre Cauchon. Pierre Cauchon was stiff for the last time. I didn't need... No. 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 This wasn't the time for me to lie, though it... An antique tray with not a... My heart skipped a beat. It was a carved elephant. But not just any carved elephant. It had been made by my father. I knew for certain because in my apartment I had its exact twin, carved into a box he had made. So Cauchon had known my father. They really must have been friends. I decided to take the carved elephant. It clearly meant nothing to Imelda. I was pretty sure I'd found all I could here. And besides, all this opulence was making me pine for my regular life of poverty. This was a huge story. It was also one heck of a puzzle with a lot of pieces missing. But I was going to crack it. And if I could just remember the name of that fancy prize you get for being an ace journalist, I was definitely going to win it this time.
Did you find anything useful?
This carving, do you know anything about it?
It was Pierre's. What does the statue have to do with...
Please, I need to know.
He was given it by a friend, something to do with Africa.
He never explained any more.
No, But I think it was important to him, always on display. Why?
It was carved by my father.
Oh, I see. I didn't know.
Imelda, I will do everything I can to find the killer.
Thank you, my dear.
And if the police ask...
Don't worry. You were never here.
Sub judice was the key.
I was going to have to find a way under the conciergerie. I decided to head straight for the quayside on the Ile de la Cité. If there was a way of getting under the conciergerie, it would have to be from there. Canchon wasn't the type for messing about on the river.
He was up to something down here. Something that got him killed.